Hello, Mark here from Casting Through Ancient Greece. Today I'm releasing an episode outside of my usual schedule in a different format. There are two reasons for this. Firstly, I'm looking at engaging with other creators who are using the ancient world and ancient Greek history as their inspiration. I would like to talk with them and see what they are doing to bring the ancient world forward and making it accessible for people today. I'll be looking at connecting with people from all areas, including other podcasters, authors, historians, artists, and more. These types of episodes will be presented as interviews, and will be disconnected from the main narrative I have been following in the main series. For this reason, I'll be titling these episodes differently, so they are easy to distinguish between in the regular feed. Instead of being a numbered episode, they will be titled Interviewed, followed by Who I am Interviewing. All episodes with a numbering convention will be part of the main narrative series that has been running. You will notice from time to time there will also be interviews in these episodes, but they will be remaining part of the main series due to directly relating to what we are talking about in the narrative. The interview series just allows me to present other interesting creators and aspects around Greek history independent of the main series. Secondly, I am unsure of how the episodes a part of the interview series will be released at this moment. I will not be having a regular release schedule for them. I think it will be more of a release as I do them, so they will just be entering into the feed sporadically for now. Though the main series will continue as normal, with release every fortnight. Just consider the interviews as an extra episode appearing in the feed from time to time. For my first interview series episode, I am speaking to Jeff Murray, and the release of this episode is also coinciding with the release of his latest Ancient World-inspired project, titled 7, themed on the 7 ancient wonders of the world. Jeff Murray is a pen and ink artist that creates intricate works on canvas inspired by exploration and travel. He resides and has set up a studio in a rural setting in the UK, where he can pursue his passion in a peaceful environment. Many of Jeff's works explore the various cities and continents of the world from a very unique perspective, while he has also been inspired by the natural world, either incorporating these elements into his work or taking them as the subject for the piece. Recently, Jeff has been exploring the ancient world and making this subject of some of his most recent works. He has been absorbed in the stories of ancient times through works of history, art, myths, podcasts, and even video games. From this, he has taken what he has learnt and reimagined these times and stories and translated them onto canvas. In this interview, I sit down with Jeff and explore his journey as an artist, and then we move on to looking at his Greek and ancient world-inspired pieces. Let's move on to the interview, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, I'm Mark Selleck, and welcome to the Casting Through Ancient Greece interview series, where I sit down and chat with other creators who have taken ancient Greek history and the ancient world as their inspiration for their work. Today, my guest is Jeff Murray, an artist from England who runs his own studio, which you can visit at www.jeffmurray.co.uk, and where you can see all of his amazing works he's created. Hello, Jeff, and welcome to the show. It's finally great to be seeing you face to face.
Hey Mark, yeah, likewise. Been a big fan now for just over a year, so it's great to be talking with you in person and doing this podcast special.
Yeah, it's been great. We've exchanged lots of messages over the sort of year and a half or so, but it's good to be face to face finally.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's been really cool. Obviously, not only getting to know you, personally, but also bouncing great ideas back and forth and helping me out on my projects with stuff. It's been really cool.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I first sort of came across you when I started the podcast, and I guess that was when you just began working on a Greek-inspired piece that you're doing at the time, and I just started the Ancient Greece podcast. So I guess you could say our creative endeavours sort of overlapped on the subject of ancient Greece. So it's going to be no surprise that our talk here tonight is going to be focused mainly on your Greek-inspired works that you've created yourself. But I thought before we get into those, we could start with you perhaps telling us a bit about yourself and what led you down the path of becoming an artist.
Yeah, so art's been something that's always been in my life since I was a young boy. I was one of those kids that was doodling at the back of the class in a science class when I was meant to be learning something else. I was doodling, so it's always been in me to be quite creative, and the opportunity to then do it as a career, which came around 9+ years ago now, professionally, and I've sort of done it since. The medium that I use is pen and ink, so I create a lot of intricate worlds, heavily inspired by landscapes, architecture, culture, nature, and then an inspiration from sort of artists such as Escher, one of my favorites, Dali with a bit of surrealism, and so they've got the architectural and surreal worlds intertwined, and then I've kind of taken inspiration from them over the years and put them into my art. And the medium of pen and ink has just always been something that I've enjoyed working with. So yeah, it's just kind of evolved from there, really. And then the subjects that I've chosen to highlight, whether it be individual cities, entire countries or continents, inspired by nature, like I said, or architectural landscapes. And then in more recent years, I've gone into the more passionate projects, which have been the ancient worlds and mythologies, which are very much in the now for me. So it's that's kind of what I do, really.
Very good. And I've noticed that, you sort of went in a bit into your style there, and I've noticed a lot of your works have this global sort of aspect where you take a city and sort of superimpose it onto a global sort of backdrop.
Like the one that
just behind you for everyone that can actually see.
Yeah.
But how did you come to arrive at this particular style and get into drawing that sort of style?
I think all of my works are always one of my favorite things. Learning art as a kid and then growing up, I've always applied into it is perspective. So whether that giving that horizon vanishing point somewhere in the piece, and then all things drawing back to that, and I've always liked the idea of that because I feel it gives the piece depth. And then over the years, I've always expanded on, okay, how else can I play around with perspectives? So the global sort of individual cities and the nature landscapes and the architectural landscapes inspired by the natural earth of that sort of curvature effect gives me so many more perspectives to play with and a challenge. I mean, essentially the individual globe cities that I do, they're inspired by like photography, like a fisheye lens, which will give you that full 360 image, and often you will see images of cities like that from above. People going in planes, helicopters. It's quite sort of these days common to almost see photography in that same style, but I quite like the challenge of, let's see what I can do with the art. Can I bring it to life? Because there's no, the pieces that I've drawn, there haven't been any individual one photographs that I've just sort of thought, okay, I'm going to draw that. If there was, it would make my life a lot easier. So a lot of it is imagination, saying, okay, let's exaggerate that building. If that one's there, then this should be here. And yeah, certain areas and cities are easier to draw. Like, for instance, I did New York a couple of years ago as a commission project, and New York was relatively easy in comparison to some cities because New York's a grid system, so you've just got up and down, left and right for the majority of it. Whereas last year I drew London, and that proved a much more challenge because it's such an older city with all the streets going this way and that way, and then the weaving river. It was I'm very happy how it turned out. That one was quite a challenge to draw. It tested me.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said, you all your art is created through the use of pens. Does that help you get that finer level of detail? Because I think when I first saw your work, just the really fine detail and what you were coming out with, it just really attracted to me to what you were doing. Does that allow you to really get that fine detail into your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've always been fascinated as well with really intricate stuff. So like the more detailed, the more fun it is for me to do, and I think that's why architecture often was quite a popular subject for me, because drawing a building with a pen, they go hand in hand so well. And then I've obviously just expanded on that for so many years. So a lot of my works building up until the last few years were predominantly black and white, and some of the ones you can see behind me there, I focus mostly on literally just the pen and the ink onto paper, or nowadays canvas, and occasionally I'd put elements of colour in, also using pen inks. But in the last couple of years, as we know, we'll talk about the Greek pieces, I've decided to go full colour with those ones, just to sort of push myself, like say, okay, well, I've done just the black and white works, can I go full colour with them? And yeah, it's proven popular, because I've had people over the years always say to me, oh, I like your stuff, but are you ever going to consider doing that in colour, or would you revisit that piece in colour, or could you do a full colour piece one time? And yeah, I think they've definitely opened up a new opportunity window, and also an audience for me with the new colour pieces, especially on the ancient subjects.
Yeah, I must say, yeah, the colours really do, I guess, sort of bring out that detail in another layer as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and I sort of visualized some of the ancient pieces that they could still work in a black and white sense, but I don't know if they'd maybe have that same level of impact, or people would engage with them as much. And I have done some previous pieces which people can see on my website over the past 4 or 5 years that have been also inspired by some ancient sort of worlds and civilizations that were just done in black and white. I did a few series in 2017 on ancient Rome, and they were predominantly black and white, and they are still, they have been fairly popular as prints, and a few of the originals did sell here and there, but in comparison to the ones that I've done over the last year or so now, that have been in full color, the engagement that I've received, an appreciation, I suppose, from these ones has been far higher. So it kind of gives me an insight as to the direction my art's going.
That's good. Yeah. Now, you're probably one of the lucky few that's been able to take their passion and turn it into a profession, and which I find very envious. But obviously, there would have been a point where you were an amateur and then had to transition to becoming a professional. How did this transition take place, and what sort of works were you creating around that period?
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's been just over 9 years since I first started selling it professionally, and I always put that first moment of when my art career began, where nothing else sort of interrupted me, and just focusing the art. I was living in New Zealand, and I've travelled for many years, and a lot of my art, as you may guess, is actually inspired from travel and countries and playing cultures. And at that point, I'd spent a year in Australia, living and working in a few different places. And I went through Southeast Asia for a few months, and then went to New Zealand on a 2-year visa. And at the time, I was very much just in travel mode, and working different jobs just to be able to go and live in a cool place. Wasn't really bothered about where and how I work, just as long as I could live in a cool place and do that. But I was actually I got down to the South Island in New Zealand, in Queenstown, and I was at the time, I'd just done a road trip for a few months. I was a little bit low on money, and I got down there, so instantly I was like, right, I could do with living somewhere, I could do with getting a job. So I was doing the usual, and at that point I was kind of used to this cycle that I'd come to know within my life on travels. When you get to a new place, look for a job, look for accommodation. And the art was something that I was always doing on my travels, just for myself. I had an A4 or an A3 sketch pad, I think, on me, and they were just little drawings. And at that point, since leaving Australia through Southeast Asia and into New Zealand, I was doing a lot of sort of nature illustrations, inspired by a lot of nature. So a lot of intertwining leaves and fauna and foliage, things like that, just in different shapes and things. So I had this collection of sketches in my book, and got to Queenstown, and it was actually some friends sort of recommended, look, you've got all these sketches, there's a local artisan market here every Saturday, down by the lakefront. I'm sure they'd have you if you wanted to apply and try and go and sell your art. And I thought, I can't do that. I've never done anything like that in my life. Well, that's not a good idea. And they're like, well, why not? There's probably a local printers in town. Why don't you look it up, make some prints of your sketches, sell them for $10, $15, whatever each. Go down and see what happens. So I thought, okay. And they were kind of like, the worst that can happen is people will say no, but at least you'll know. And I was very scared of I suppose, the rejection, because the only time people had ever seen my work was friends or family or the occasional passerby or something. But I'd never shown my work publicly before. And yeah, I did. That week I got in touch with the people at the market, and they said, "Yeah, it's $25 for a pitch. Just bring your own table and gear and whatever you sell, as long as it's handmade and it's yours, you can go for it." So I thought, okay, well, I tick all those boxes. So I searched. I think I went to the Salvation Army and got myself a table and a cloth and some real basic stuff.
Yeah.
And I went to these printers at the time and wanted to make a few prints. And I remember it was maybe like around about 100 New Zealand dollars for a bunch of prints. And at the time I was thinking, oh, I don't know if I can spend this much money on sort of like getting stuff out there, but I thought, well, let's just try and see what happens. Did that, went to the market, and it was near a sellout for me. I wasn't expecting that, including an original, which I it was kind of mind blowing at the time. I'd never had complete strangers see my work for the first time and decide, I like that, I want to put that on my wall. And it went really well. And then I thought, okay, yeah, I'll do this again next weekend for sure. And then it sort of progressed from there. And then after about a month of doing that, I decided, why am I also working another job that I'm not particularly enjoying when I could be doing my art full time? It's obviously selling. So that was kind of the birth of it. And in New Zealand, it was mostly just the markets, and I was focusing just on the art, making the art and doing the markets. And I did have a local show there, which went pretty well. And then unfortunately I had to leave New Zealand because my work visa ran out. I then traveled through Asia again for about a year and a half, which was great time. So more inspiration gained and things. And even when I was in India for a bit, ended up selling my art. I sort of got friends with an investment banker out there who helped me sort of get my art seen to some of the business sort of places within Delhi. So I got introduced to a few sort of owners of hotels and shopping malls and places like that, which was quite interesting. It was unusual because I I went to India expecting to travel India and ended up sort of kind of trying to sell my art there, which was quite fun. But then I returned to the UK at the end of 2014 and decided, okay, right, well, I think it's time to get my art set up over here, and yeah, just continued to do artisan markets because I always know that they're good for people seeing the art in the flesh, particularly people who have never come across my work before. They'll just be walking along at a market and see it, and if they like it, they'll want to go for it there, which has been great. And also been doing art shows and exhibitions over the last 6-7 years now, I'd say. And then obviously set up the website and the social media pages and gained quite a bit more attention and attraction through those. So yeah, that's pretty much how it's all come to be. But started in New Zealand, and yeah, so I've always got big thanks to New Zealand for that reason.
Yeah, I've been to New Zealand a couple of times, and I can imagine that it would be a very inspirational place for an artist to be drawing or painting or doing whatever they do there.
Yeah, there was a lot of inspiration there, both from the people, the landscapes, everything, and I was very welcome there as an artist as well, which was great.
Yeah, good. So I thought, all right, well, we probably might get onto the Greek history side of things now.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I said earlier, I first came across yourself. I think it was mainly through Facebook groups. I had just started up my podcast, so joined some Greek history groups and started trying to get some stuff out there. And I think that's when I first came across some updates or ideas that you were doing around one of your pieces, which was Ascendia Acropolis. And I just found those works very, very attractive and started following along with you. Now, why Greek history? What turned you down that path? Have you always had an interest in Greek history or ancient history?
Yeah, ancient history has always been a bit of a fascinating subject sort of for me throughout my life, but it's something that I'd never thought about introducing into my art until maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago was when it sort of was ticking in my mind. And like I mentioned before, in 2017, I did a series inspired by ancient Rome, which um, sort of was a little bit of a birth to think, okay, it would be quite fun to do more of these ancient world subjects in time. But at the time, I was doing lots of shows. So I'd usually do 3, 4, sometimes 5 shows a year internationally and in the UK. And normally I'd be creating pieces in time for those shows. And sometimes it would be pieces that I knew were, say, popular or would be part of a continuous theme that I'd already worked on. So I'd already mentioned my globe cities and the countries and continents made up as individual cities, and the nature inspired pieces. Those were popular ones for me to sort of continue working on that theme, because if they'd sold in the past, if the expression, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I've continued to work on them in time. And then for me to work on sort of a more passionate project, which was going to be brand new, I wasn't sure if it would be popular within them shows. But the reason why they maybe started last year, I'll be honest, lockdown, COVID-19 had probably a huge impact on that. It meant that the normal time of the year where I'd be getting ready to do art shows, creating pieces for them, all the shows had been postponed or cancelled. So instead of working towards getting something ready for a show, I thought, well, I don't have an agenda really at the moment of what people would expect. I know I'm going to work on something that I've always wanted to work on. And a lot of people could argue and say, well, as an artist, you should maybe do that anyway. That's your free will. But obviously, because I've been doing it as a profession for quite a few years, and I have learned what's popular and what's not. And at the same time, I always do want to draw. I always draw things that I generally want to draw. But if I know certain things have become more popular than others, I'll focus on those ones. And the ancient Greek inspired works came about maybe 3 years ago or so. And we'll get onto the one I'm sure you're going to talk about, the Greek Odyssey piece as well, which was the big one last year.
Definitely.
That was the original idea. I originally thought I'd love to draw an entire map of ancient Greece. And just one big thing, and I already knew that piece, one day I'll do that in color. But as I started to research more into that, started to read books and familiarize myself with a bit of ancient Greece and mythology combined, I then thought it would be fun to draw something a bit more zoomed in, a bit more personal, instead of just going for the big one-off piece. So I came up with the idea of the Ascendia Acropolis piece, which was, I thought it would be cool to show Athens in its heyday, and the streets hopefully living and breathing, and not just the obvious Acropolis in the foreground or Parthenon, like the famous iconic building. If anything, that's one of the least focused parts of that piece. It's about the journey up towards it, and my art, I've always wanted to reflect a journey because it takes me so long to create them, and they're all inspired from travel. And that particular piece was about a journey through Athens up to the Acropolis, that the reward is in the climb, the reward's in the journey, kind of thing. So yeah, that was kind of, if anything, like a build up to the next piece, but it was just as fun to create.
Yep, no worries. Yeah, I was just about to get into all the I guess your Greek inspired pieces. Now there was, I guess, 3 that I was going to focus on tonight or today for you. But and that was, you brought up the first one was Ascend the Acropolis, and you've also talked about, you've got a Greek Odyssey, and obviously the newest work you're doing at the moment, I guess, is more of a ancient world in general sort of thing. But we'll get to that one. First of all, I think I better point out, obviously, this is what we're talking about is a very visual subject. So everyone that is listening, I'm going to put up images attached to this episode's page so that if you're listening along, you can bring them up and really see what we're talking about as we go through these works as well. But so you've already brought up Ascend Acropolis, and I guess you've kind of gone into what you're actually trying to achieve with that image and what it's kind of about. Now, one other thing I really like with that piece is how, which I find sort of, it seems to be a bit of a departure from what you were doing with your other global sort of works, is where you've actually made the city really come to life. And it's almost as if you're transported back to around 400 BC and basically seeing people going about their daily lives around, in and around Athens, around the marketplaces and down the Piraeus and all those types of areas. Coming up with this, the way you depicted it, where did you draw your inspiration from to create, I guess, visually how it looked, but then also the atmosphere that you've brought out within it?
So I think, the visuals were definitely one of the things that almost inspired me to eventually create that particular piece. And a combination of, over the years of building up to the, just generally taking my work down this ancient world inspired direction. I was reading many books, watching a lot of old documentaries and films, and obviously a lot of film. One thing I will say quickly about films is I'm a huge movie fan, but I've realised in my research through watching a lot of films inspired by ancient worlds, ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, there's not many of them that are accurate, and I'm sure you'll be able to back me up with that one, as I've obviously listened to your the 300 episodes and things, and visually fun. They're very fun to watch, a lot of them, but they don't maybe show them in their truest light or their best way. So I still feel there's definitely a good ancient Greek movie and ancient Roman movie. But Gladiator was pretty cool. But a lot of them, you know what I'm saying. So a combination of helping visualize through those things as well. One thing over the last couple of years I've sort of gotten back into, which I'll be honest, I hadn't done since I was probably in my teens, was gaming, PlayStation, Xbox, whatever they be. And obviously since returning from travels, I was able to, now living in a place where I was able to say, okay, why not get some games again? And through them, I discovered and a lot of people probably go, okay, maybe roll their eyes to this, but I discovered the Assassin's Creed games. And one of them, the game from 2018, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but it's focused on ancient Greece. I mean, storytelling, for whatever reason, the gameplay, I know a lot of the diehard fans of the Assassin's Creed games have definitely said that they have departed away from the original sort of theme of what those games are meant to be. But in terms of visuals and sort of just generally where they've taken the games of detail and dedication, and that were really impressive. And I was really impressed by, because they did the one the year before, Origins, which was set in ancient Egypt, and that was really like, wow, like it was cool just to be able to. And they did the discovery tours as well on the games, where you don't have to play the game, you can just walk through and just learn a little bit. And then obviously, so the Odyssey one was very much set in ancient Greece and gave some really cool visuals. So I thought, right, this has really helped me. And I'm very aware that I know a lot of it is inaccurate because it's a game, and whether it be for copyright or they weren't allowed to get the exact replicas visualized correctly. I felt they did a pretty good job of sort of just making you feel like you were in ancient Athens some 2,000 plus years ago. So that was really sort of helpful for me to think. It inspired me to think, I want to draw something within those lines. And I really liked the sort of the way the sun had sort of, the lighting on it was very special. And it just really sort of inspired me to think, okay, right, let's get some cool visuals going. And just many concepts, many ideas putting together before I eventually came up with that particular one design. In fact, where is it? Just up here on my shelf. This is an original concept I did. I think I did this in early 2018 of the Acropolis one.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So that was just like a little mini one, just to see if that could kind of, work in that sense. And then I played the game after doing that, thinking, oh wow, okay, right, well, it's obviously speaking to me. I've got to do this. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it obviously works. I've got it sitting up in the lounge, and it looks fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So obviously, you've taken, I guess, You've taken film, video games, ancient history, and all those sort of things to try and tie in, I guess, get an image in your head of what you want to put down on the canvas. And
yeah.
Now, obviously, is this one of the first works where you've really integrated, I guess, like people going about their everyday lives within the scene as well?
No, I've done it a couple of times in the past. On the series that I did on ancient Rome, I did a piece titled "As Long as the Colosseum Stands, Rome Shall Stand," and it's depicting, the Colosseum. And on the left, it's like a panorama image, and on the left side of the image, it's the Colosseum as it would have been, in ancient Rome. And then as it transitions across to the right, it's showing the decay in the rock, and then it's Rome as it is modern day.
Yeah.
And I have drawn people in the foreground. So on the left, you've got like centurions, Caesars, gladiators, and things. And then as it transitions, you've got people taking selfies, and a wedding proposal, and an artist painting, and there's a car and things like that. So that was definitely a piece where I incorporated people sort of living and breathing within the space, particularly in a close-up, because I think a lot of my works have always been, I like drawing the above perspectives. So there's generally not as much stuff in the foreground or close-up detail within, so that you can actually see people, what they're doing, other than just tiny little stick figures sometimes. So, but obviously the Ascendia Acropolis piece is in full color. So that was the first time where I was drawing people fairly close up, but in more detail than just the pen and ink black work that I was working on. So this time, full color, how can I make them live and breathe? And then you've got movement. So yeah, you're probably familiar with the piece now by seeing that there's some people just walking along, some people dancing with some music, there's people on horses, people in the marketplace bartering, some kids play fighting, things like that. Just all different movements. And I mean, people is not generally my specialty subject. I haven't drawn figures as much sort of within my art career. So every time I do draw them, I'm like, okay, right, let's maybe make sure and get them right, because it's not my specialty subject. And I have to familiarize myself with movements and things. So, but I think I got away with it on the Ascendia Acropolis piece of trying to make the people look like they're having a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the scene itself of the whole city definitely is the main focus of the work, but just the people and the movement and everyone going about their daily lives just brings a whole another layer of personality to the whole scene itself, which I think really works.
One of my sort of favorite things I actually did in that piece was in the foreground, there's that marketplace, and I've done like almost a layered sort of a bit muddy and sandy sort of texture throughout, where they're all set up, all the little gazebos and the tents selling all their stuff there. And I've done a couple of puddles, and there was something really satisfying to draw a puddle reflection with just some of the bits of people reflecting back in the puddle, or a pillar or a tree, something that's just reflecting upside down. They're just very subtle details, and I'll be honest, not everybody will maybe notice or realize what they're meant to be, but in my head I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with that. So they were quite, I remember at the time, technically challenging that particular little market section took me a good few days just to work on, because I was really layering up the sand and the dirt, and I wanted to obviously get footprints in and shadows correctly positioned, and of course people and movement. And yeah, it was one of my favorite little sections that I did on that piece. That's definitely a real little living, vibrant, bright, you know, area.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I found too with your work hanging up there. You have a look at it, but then it seems every once in a while you have another look and you're like, oh, I never noticed that before. Just these little fine details that you just pick up over time, as every sort of time, every now and again when you're walking past it again.
Yeah, yeah. My slogan, "Look closer," is sort of like my little thing that I have on my website and business card, and that is, yeah. Hopefully, the more people look into it, the more they'll realise. I mean, there's some pieces in a lot of my work. I'll occasionally look back at something and think, "Oh yeah, I forgot I put that in."
Yeah.
And yeah, like, and then in more recent years, I've decided like to come up with these hidden gem lists, particularly if I'm doing a big piece with lots of things hidden in it. Like, right, I know I'm going to be putting these in, and
Yep.
we'll make sure there's some hidden stuff for people to look out for if they're really looking closely. And I've also, maybe not throughout my whole art career, but definitely in the last maybe 2 years or so, I've been hiding my logo in my works if people can look out for it. So it's just a little hidden thing to try and find, which
Okay.
is the chameleon looking into the mirror.
All right. I'm gonna have to look out for that now. All right. Well, we might move on to your next inspired Greek piece. And now this one, I think, sort of goes back and takes a bit more of that global view with a larger geographical area. And this is a Greek Odyssey. And with this one, you're basically got the geographical region of the Greek world. So we've got all of Greece and a bit of Anatolia off to the right. Now, from what I understand, this was quite a passion project of yours, and may have been in the planning for some time. Could you perhaps take us through your journey to arriving at a workable concept and to where you felt confident to start beginning work on the project?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll firstly just outright say it's been my favourite piece I've ever made, and I will. I don't know when I'll next create a piece that will top that one in terms of how much passion was behind that piece, because I was so grateful that I was able to make it. And it was years in the making in terms of like the ideas and the concepts brewing for it. And essentially, Ascend the Acropolis was a piece that was part of the concepts for that piece. Where I finished on Ascend the Acropolis was actually where I started on a Greek Odyssey. I started by drawing the outline of the Acropolis, again within the center of Athens, and spreading from there. But the idea of that piece was, it originally spawned from the idea and inspired from my global worlds, where I'm taking perspective of the world with its curvature effect. I get a lot of stick occasionally from flat earthers who, who tell me that my drawings are very inaccurate, which is always an interesting conversation to be had. But of course, back then, I suppose the Greeks were the first ones that predicted that the world was not flat, weren't they? So that's my inspiration as well behind that. So I had this idea that ancient Greece has the curvature effect of the world, but I remember that I did a couple of concepts for it a few years ago, and I thought it would be really cool if maybe, just to break it up a bit, if there was like Poseidon coming out of the sea, or Zeus in the sky, or just like the gods maybe looking down on them in some way. I just thought that would be cool, maybe. And I didn't know if it would work. And then I started reading a lot into mythology, which I was reading both about ancient Greek history and also mythology side by side. So sometimes they were becoming blurred. I was like, right, what's real, what's not? And obviously you can tell the difference definitely between what's real and not for the names and things after looking into it so much. And I think the more it evolved, the more I thought I would like to tell the story of mythology through this piece, as well as showing the world of ancient Greece. And I think that's what's so great about ancient Greek mythology, it's set within the real world of ancient Greece. Obviously, there's a few realms and things that were, inspired definitely from their imagination, such as the underworld, Olympus. Obviously, Olympus is a real place, but they imagined that on a cloudy day you wouldn't be able to see the top of it, and that's where the gods all sat. And obviously, things like the Elysium fields and all other things that are related within it, sort of tied into this world of, I've got the real world of ancient Greece, but I can also create a fictional world that the gods sort of are living and breathing in. So what originally came to an idea of maybe just having Poseidon in the sea, a bit like some of those old cartography style maps where you'll see like a map of the Caribbean or a particular sea or islands, or just generally a world map, and there'll be an occasional whale popping out or a sea monster, things like that. It was that kind of, it would be cool to have Poseidon there as well because he's part of Greek mythology. But then the more I looked into it, like I said, and researched and read up and watched films and podcasts, I'm sure you're obviously aware of Let's Talk About Myths, maybe by Liv Albert. Her mythology podcast sort of helped me sort of realize a lot of them through, in a whole new light as well, which was really great to just think, okay, the gods played a huge part in the everyday lives of the ancient Greeks, and all of their temples and the cities are all named after them and things. So I thought, right, let's see if I can incorporate the gods as well. So it originally started with just the idea of having Poseidon in the sea and then maybe Zeus in the sky. But then as the more I researched it, the more I thought I want to have quite a few of them dotted throughout the piece. But the biggest challenge in the piece at the time, and personally my most favorite thing that I've done within the piece, is the frieze border. Because originally I thought, well, I can put in a few gods here and there, and maybe a couple of the heroes and the people, but there's obviously so many stories to tell, so many, and to try and incorporate or capture them all within that within the world, like, even though it's a very big canvas that I worked on, I don't know if I'm going to be able to include them all within that map, particularly in areas where there's, say, multiple stories or myths that happened within the same location. It's kind of like, well, which one do you choose? Do you choose the more popular one or that one because it's still just important? But to put them both there would mean it would be very squished, and that's just my particular style of art. So I thought, well, let's at least get the gods and some of the heroes in, but any stories or things that maybe deserve a bit more attention personally, let's somehow create them elsewhere. And I was coming up with so many different ideas, and then I eventually came up with the idea of this frieze-style border all the way around the edge, which I just visualized them all as statues. So some of them you'll probably notice feature in both the actual piece and then in the border multiple times, and that's maybe showing two different stories where the same god or hero featured, just to sort of give them that extra bit of life. And yeah, it was a real challenge to know which ones to put where, which ones to include. And I know there's definitely a few that I haven't included because, how long's a piece of string?
Yeah, there's a lot to get into.
Oh yeah, for sure. But it was great fun once I eventually got started on that piece, for sure.
Yeah. Now, obviously, as you said, well, you've got Greek myth and Greek history kind of become intertwined as well, because you've got the ancient Greeks look to a lot of these stories as, I guess, mythical figures that had been founders of their cities, or gods that had been that were created from their lands and this type of thing. And obviously you've done a great job incorporating those stories into the geographical locations that they tend to be associated with. So as you look around the map, you've got, I guess, stories abound. I mean, I've had people come around and they don't really know much about Greek mythology, and they've looked at Greek Odyssey up on the wall, and I mean, you could stand there for hours just talking, because you've got, one little section you could start rambling off a story of Greek mythology, and then the next bit is just so many stories within the picture itself that it's amazing. And I guess I find I'm particularly drawn to I guess Apollo bringing the sunrise across the image from the right there. That looks very cool. And I'm I guess a bit partial to Apollo as well. I like one of my favorite sort of gods within the whole pantheon. And definitely I really like the whole Minotaur myth with Theseus. So I really like how you've sort of captured Theseus down on Crete with the Minotaur. And even my kids, they love it. I mean, they one of the figures they tend to point out is Bellerophon and Pegasus up fighting the Chimera. I really enjoy that.
The Chimera as well.
Yeah, it's
so that was thing. So even though they're mythology, a lot of nearly all of the individual sort of the characters, whether it be the gods or the heroes that I've included in the piece, that was quite a challenge to know where the location of a lot of those things were. So Bellerophon riding Pegasus, fighting the Chimera. I read it in the stories, and I had to go over so many versions just to double check. Right, that's roughly where it was. And then there's a few more obvious things like where Mount Olympus is, for example. Where the island of Delos is. The Minoans and the Minotaur with Theseus and the labyrinth, and then of course you've got things like that going back to Theseus and the Minotaur and the labyrinth. So the city is obviously very much a real place. The ruins are still there, but the labyrinth obviously was part of the myth. Yes. So that's where I've incorporated both a real place, a living civilization, with a mythical architectural landscape, and then obviously the hero fighting the monster there as well. So there was, and obviously I've drawn Troy in there as well, which I knew would obviously be a huge feature within Greek mythology. It had to sort of work. But also going along with the locations thing, there's a few things in there that I've sort of bended the rules a bit just so they could get attention. So for instance, down in the bottom left-hand corner where I've drawn the whirlpool with Odysseus' ship, and so that's part of the Odyssey with Scylla and Charybdis, I think it is, the whirlpool and the monster. So those supposedly are in the strait in between Sicily and the tip of Italy, the toe of Italy. So that's where that supposedly it was meant to have taken place within the Odyssey. But because within the world that I've drawn, that would be an extra canvas drawing off to the edge, because Italy doesn't quite feature in that piece. So that's where I've brought that within the piece so that it can be given some attention. And also the same with Perseus slaying Medusa. The reason why I've included Medusa within the freeze border is because the location of Medusa was, way like beyond Greece as we know it now. It's almost more down towards, I think, like the northern tips of Africa, off towards modern day. I can't think of the name of it now.
Libya, I think. Down near Libya.
Yeah, was it Libya? I thought it was much further across the Med, towards modern day Marrakesh. What's the country there? I can't think of it. Yeah, off that way. But either way, it's much further sort of away. Morocco. That's what I was trying to think of. Sorry. I think, roughly around there, that's where Medusa supposedly was. But part of the same story with Perseus is when he rescues Andromeda from the sea monster. And that featured a little bit more within the map and the world that I've drawn of ancient Greece. So that's why within the piece, I've drawn him rescuing Andromeda from the chained rocks from the sea monster. But then within the freeze border, his probably more iconic and notable slaying of a monster, Medusa, features heavily in the border, and I knew Medusa's head. I wanted that to be quite predominant somewhere, because it's one of the most iconic figures, facial figures within Greek mythology.
Yeah, you've definitely achieved that. One of my daughters is very freaked out by that image of Medusa's head.
Yeah, it's I knew I'd get a little sort of like always making her face quite scary looking. Some people are going to really like it or be freaked out by it. I thought, well, it's Medusa. Gotta go full on with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Poseidon's probably maybe one of your favorite gods. Just by looking at the image, you just can't help be drawn to his placement in the image. And then I feel maybe this had something to do with it when you put out a video of you, I think, over maybe some 10 hours drawing.
The time lapse.
Yeah, doing the time lapse thing, and you put that up on social media. It just looked like you, I don't know, there was a lot of sort of passion into that figure that you were drawing. Was he one of your sort of favorite gods? And
well, the thing with Poseidon, so I wouldn't say so much maybe he's my favorite god. If anything, one of my favorite gods is actually Prometheus, and the story of him chained to the rocks of the Callias Mountains.
Yep.
I love that whole story and the meaning behind it all. The reason why Poseidon is maybe the size he is within that piece, and this generally goes for all of the gods, some of them you will notice are much bigger than others, but then even some of the ones that are all roughly a similar height, like I've drawn Athena that bit bigger than some of the others, but then Hera is that bit bigger, but then Persephone's a bit smaller than she should be, and things like that. I've almost drawn them all in different sizes, in maybe relevance to how powerful they were, or how not just powerful within what's their trump card said they were worth, but as in how the Greeks maybe worshipped them. And also as well, Poseidon was he was, like I said, that first visual I had a few years ago, Poseidon coming out of the sea. So I always knew I wanted a big image of Poseidon coming out of the sea. But I think also because one of my favorite things about Greek mythology is, I suppose for the Greeks, it was their version of science. It was them saying, why does the sky make a loud thunder? Why do the waves crash when it's, why do the harvests do this? Oh, it must be the gods. They were the first ones, I suppose, to come up with these. And then they obviously gave them gods stories, and that's when the myths, I suppose, came about. And I find that quite fascinating. And Greece, made up with hundreds, and is it? It's not quite thousands of islands, is it? It's hundreds, isn't it?
I think it's just over 1,000 islands.
Is it just over 1,000 islands in Greece? Yeah. So, very much a seafaring race. They relied heavily on the seas, and the sea is such a powerful thing. So I just thought, well, Poseidon, he represents like what a lot of the Greeks live and breathe and rely on as their everyday sort of source of needs. They need to be kind to him. They need to respect him. They need to, essentially make deals with him so that they can live their lives, whether that be fishing, crossing them. The sea was a very big part of and I've obviously learned that as well through listening to your podcast with the back and forth, between Angola, Persia, Asia Minor to mainland to the islands. It's just, and obviously down to Africa as well, and just the Mediterranean was such a big, was almost the heart of a lot of the culture there. So, and then if the sea god Poseidon is what the god of the sea, I just figured he needs to be quite predominant in that piece. But also as well, and this comes back to what I was saying before about trying to squeeze, multiple people or things within a piece. Certain areas, maybe there's not as much going on. For instance, a large open area of sea, if there's not much going on, I've got a lot more space to work with. Whereas if Poseidon was the god of Thera, that's modern day Santorini, then I've got a very small space to work with, So in comparison for the grand scheme of the rest of Greece. So that's why as well, Poseidon, I was like, I've got this great image of him just rising out of the sea, sort of all the waves crashing, boats sort of almost capsizing around him. and his trident as well. Just everything about the image of that, I just thought I want that to be quite a highlight within the piece. But yeah, you're not the first person to sort of say, "Oh, is Poseidon your favourite god?" Then, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I just
he's pretty cool, I'd say.
yeah. I mean, Zeus is, I guess, depicted around the same size, but it's just the positioning of him that really brings your attention to him. But,
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and you touched on something I was going to ask you. I mean, well, I guess you've kind of answered it. Was the whole notion around that there's many stories that relate to the gods and different versions we're told, and like you said, I think it was a very clever concept to come up with the frieze that you did. So it allowed you to explore the same character through multiple stories as well. So that was I think I remember when you were sort of coming up with the concept of that frieze and working out what you're going to do with it. Was that, had it been a workable concept before you, I guess, had the frieze idea, or was that sort of like here's how I can solve that problem of combining those stories?
It was a bit of both, to be honest. It was I sort of was conceptualizing for ages. Originally, I had many ideas, and I probably put, I don't know, only 40% of my ideas down onto actual paper of concepts before making the big piece that it came to be, and before eventually settling on the final concept, which I actually just got on the windowsill over there. One of the ideas was this idea of the gods sort of all up on Mount Olympus, all surrounding like almost like a balcony looking down over the Greek world. But that would have meant that there'd be I don't know, it just didn't quite work that it could just be the gods, because then I wouldn't be able to incorporate a lot of the heroes as well within the piece and other things. It would just, and not all of the gods would be on Mount Olympus at one. There were too many sort of red flags maybe around that idea. And I think, yeah, just taking inspiration from ancient Greek and modern day architecture friezes within buildings. I've always found them quite fascinating anyway. Every time I see one somewhere, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna have a look at this. It's always quite cool to see. And I thought, if I could just, why not make an entire border made of the frieze? One of the ideas was not to have it as a frieze, but was to have them still part of the piece, so in full color. But I thought that would maybe be too distracting, and it would look like two separate things for some reason. They just wouldn't go with the piece, even though they would still be in color, which is what the rest of the piece is. It didn't feel right to me. But the idea of that frieze border was, there was something plain to, like, saying something was right to me when that idea came around. And then I drew it a number of times. And I wasn't sure if I'd draw them all in the same size and proportion, like every figure next to each other would be the exact same, or if some would be larger than others, or certain objects larger. And in the end, I went with a bit of both. Like, for instance, as you might have noticed, Perseus holding Medusa's head is much larger than some of the figures next to him, for example, because for me to have Medusa's head much smaller just wasn't sitting right. I was like, that her head with the snakes, it's so iconic, so that needs to almost be its own thing there. That can't just be a little hidden thing within the piece. So that's why I went for the idea of some big, some small, and then there'll be lots of little hidden ones in there that sometimes you might have missed. And that's why I provided that guide as well, just because I figured a lot of people might want to know who I've actually drawn in. But then also, part of the frieze border, the idea that I came up with mid-project was the 4 separate corners, which were like window pockets showing the 4 other sort of realms or areas within ancient Greece that weren't focused within the piece, but still with attention. So I think the 2 sort of biggest ones that maybe didn't get full visual attention were Mount Olympus, but obviously showing the gods within it, but also the underworld. And they play huge parts in Greek mythology, but because they're not within the real world of ancient Greece, I figured they need attention. The bottom right corner, now originally that was more, originally I told myself, Atlantis, But the more I've obviously looked into and researched it, I realised Atlantis, it is ancient Greece, but it's not. It's kind of its own. And obviously, I'm guessing you're going to be touching on that soon as well. And
Yeah.
I realised I didn't want to claim to say, "Oh, this is my take on Atlantis" within the piece, because I figured it's, it's a myth, but you don't know sort of where and when that myth kind of starts within Greek mythology. And I was struggling to kind of find myth-related stories that specifically said Atlantis within them. So in the end, I thought, well, I still do want to draw something underwater related, because obviously, as I've mentioned, the sea and everything I felt was such an important part of ancient Greece. So I love the idea of that, just that sunken temple, some sea life around it and everything. And then the fourth window, originally I was going to draw the Elysian Fields, but I felt that they visually weren't maybe as exciting for me to put in, or had been included enough within Greek mythology stories to capture. But I ended up just focusing on the birth, almost inspired by the famous Botticelli painting Birth of Venus, obviously Aphrodite, and Cyprus in the background. And Cyprus is, features quite predominantly in Greek mythology, but it's another place that I hadn't drawn within the main map. So that was my kind of little nod and shout out to Cyprus within that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I was going to touch on, well, you slightly touched on it as well, was the whole concept behind the hidden gems that you've put into this work as well. Now, this is obviously a question my kids wanted me to ask you, because they stand there with the pamphlet that you sent out with it, trying to count off everything that they can find. Was that a concept that you went into the work knowing you were going to do, or did it develop over time? And is it going to be something that you're going to continue with as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I came up with the sort of a hidden gems thing a few years ago. One of my, straight out, my favorite number is 7, and I always like to put things hidden in 7 or multiples of 7 within the work. It's kind of, I say always, it's been something I've been doing now since I think 2015. I did a big piece called The City of Europe, and at the time a whole map of Europe, and I decided to randomly hide 7 helicopter pads throughout the piece, and just as one thing. And then I think a few people, I told them, and they said, "Oh, you should do more of these," and then feature a little list of them. I thought, okay, so each time I did a new piece, I thought, right, I'll include 7 of them and 7 of them, and then I'll make a little list that will go with it. And I mean, I haven't done it on every single piece. Not all of my works have got the extent of hidden things within, but the Greek mythology piece, I knew in advance, right, there's going to be a lot of things within this piece that I want to hide within it, and see if people are really looking. So that one, I came up with the special sort of list, but I mean, the piece of paper is possibly somewhere in here, might be even on my workstation trolley still, because I keep the original pieces of paper and I almost write them down, and then I tally them off as I include them in, just so I know, yeah, okay, that's at least 6 sharks now I've drawn in there. I've got at least one more to include somewhere.
Yep.
But I'll always re-go over the whole thing. And like I said as well, sometimes I'll want to put more than 7 in, so then I'll round it up to the next 14 or 21, and that's just because some people call it OCD, but I've just sort of made it as one of my things. And then obviously my new piece, which we'll talk about in a bit, is called 7, and it's inspired by the 7 wonders. So yeah, I mean, I don't really need to hide many things. It's already got the 7 in it, kind of by the title. But yeah, the hidden gems is definitely, it's just, for me, I like to think it gives people more than just a piece of art to hang on their wall. They've got something not only to look closer at, but to try and find things within. So yeah, a bit of fun.
Yep. Now I've got another question too that I guess my wife wanted me to put to you. Was she stands there and looks at the Greek Odyssey. It's such an immense work with so much detail, and she just wonders, when you've got that blank canvas in front of you, how do you just where do you decide you're going to make that first mark?
So that's always the hardest thing about any of my works, is knowing where to start. And sometimes I'll be sat there for days, and sometimes even a week or so, before I actually put the pen onto the canvas. It's always knowing where to, and it's not so much maybe about the motivation, it's knowing how the journey is just going to go from that point. And I think the global pieces, they're much easier because I know I'm always going to start in the middle, and I always start bang in the middle and work my way up from them. They're relatively easy in that sense. But the big country continent ones, so whether it be the modern day ones that I've done over the years or the ancient ones like ancient Greece, they were really sort of, and particularly the ancient Greek, the Greek Odyssey piece. I'll quickly say the reason why I was stumbling on the names there is that was one of the things on that piece, the Greek Odyssey, that I didn't have a name for it the whole time. I kept the whole time I made that piece, I didn't know what I was going to call it. And I was I think I even spoke with you maybe a couple of times, like I'm not 100% sure what name I'm actually going to give this piece, but in the end I came up with a Greek Odyssey, gods and goddesses, heroes and monsters, and I just felt right, that kind of sums up everything I'm going for. But yeah, knowing where to start the piece is always the hardest thing, and that particular, I knew I wanted it to, and it was my biggest canvas I ever worked on. It was a 3 by 4 foot, so 36 by 48 inches. And I remember getting it from my art shop last year and bringing it back here. I'm like, okay, right, this is going to happen. And I'd done all my concepts, so I knew sort of, right, let's turn this little mini concept into this big thing. And it was knowing where to start that journey. And I think, in the end, it was kind of appropriate that I'd finished, like I said, the Acropolis piece. So I thought, right, well, maybe I should start in Athens. That can be my first little thing to draw. And as well, for those big pieces, I always, I'll do a pencil outline of like a silhouette and a mask to give me a shape to work with on the canvas. So I actually, to get that sort of, to get the image of ancient Greece, or just generally Greece, should I say, with all the islands and the land shape and everything, but with the curvature effect, I actually used an image projected from my laptop onto the canvas from Google Earth. So I played with the perspectives, tilted it at the angle I wanted, and then plugged in my projector, projected that onto the canvas, and then traced the outline of Greece onto the canvas, just so I knew, okay, right, well, if anyone ever does say anything, I can actually say, no, that is where it's meant to be. In terms of like the islands or the cities and that. And then roughly, I just did like I wrote a little A for where Athens would be, an S for Sparta, T for Troy, etc. Just roughly where I know, okay, at least cover that area for that city, or that god's going to go there, that's going to go here, etc. And but as well, like going back to the, how do I do such a piece on that scale? And for me, with that piece as well, the Greek Odyssey being in full color, it was, I remember at the beginning, I did the outlines in black and white just of Athens, and then I moved down to Peloponnese and did all of that in black and white. And then after about a week or so of just doing pen work, I decided, okay, right, now let's add some color. And then let's just, because I didn't know if I was going to draw the whole thing in black and white first and then color at the end, or if I was going to do stages. So I'd done about a week or so, like I said, of just pen, black work, and then I decided, right, let's add some color, and then that felt good to do that. And as you mentioned earlier, I like to share the in-process images on the social media pages. That's how you came about discovering the work, and that gives people a real insight that it's handmade and I'm making it as we speak, and this is what I've done today, and what do you think of, it's going to be ready next week, or should I do this or that? And I definitely noticed people were engaging more on the social media pages with the full color images. So I thought, okay, I'm getting a lot of good feedback that's making me feel good for it. So I'll continue just adding the color as I go. And I started by doing Athens, Peloponnese, moving up through to where like Mount Olympus was, and did the cities in the foreground, like Larissa, a few others, and then moving around up to like Thrace, coming across to where Troy is, in Hellesport, and then down through like Pergamon, Halicarnassus, all the way around the edge, and then did Asia Minor, and then I added the islands at the end. And then before I did the sea, I did a rough outline of that frieze border that I was talking about, just in pencil, just to give me a mask to work with. And then I did all the sea, and I think the sea took me over a month to do, just the sea alone. And then add in the gods and the thing. And that's the thing, I was also then adding the gods as I came up with. The first god I actually drew, or character within the piece, was actually is it Asclepius, the god of medicine? It's one of them names. I always lose it. Asclepius.
Yeah,
Asclepius, something like that.
I'm terrible with Greek pronunciation myself. I have to often when I'm doing recordings, I sit there and get onto Google and try and find pronunciations before I continue on.
Well, there's so many of them. Some of the names of the characters within mythology, I was really struggling on some of them. I was just reading that, and in my head I know what it means, but then to say it out loud. So either way, the god of medicine, and you can see him just south of Athens there with his stick with the two serpents on. He was actually the first one I drew, and originally I had this idea that all the gods would be this kind of glimmering golden color, almost a bit statue-like looking. But then I thought maybe that's more for the border. The border can be that frieze statue effect, and the ones within the piece can be a bit more living. And that's when I started to add different hair colors and even eye colors on some of them, and clothing and things like that. So yeah, and as you may have noticed, some not so clothed characters within the piece, which some people have given me a bit of stick for, but hey, it's ancient Greece.
It's part of Greek history.
Exactly.
But yeah. Okay, so a lot of time I thought really goes into before you really get going on creating the work at the start. Well, I guess we might move on to your newest project that you're, I guess, almost finished, well, almost ready to wrap up and release to the world. But now I understand, obviously, you were originally, I think, from a Greek Odyssey, you did one on Italy before you started this latest ancient world.
Background there. Yeah. It's on the floor because it's I've run out of wall space at the moment. Normally I do shows each year, and often the originals would go to a new home, but they're starting to pile up a bit. So
yeah.
But,
and I think you said you've called this one 7 because obviously the theme is the 7 ancient wonders of the world.
Yep.
And I guess for everyone out there who's trying to count them all off, what have we got? We've got the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. We've got
Temple of Artemis,
statue of Zeus at Olympia. We've got the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus.
Yeah.
We've got the Colossus at Rhodes.
Yep.
And I think they're all our Greek city-state wonders. And then we've got the Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Great Pyramids of Giza, and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Yeah.
All 7. And I think this piece almost came a bit of an inspiration from last year's Greek Odyssey. And you can actually see 4 of the ones that we mentioned that are within the Greek states. They all feature, or 3 of them feature quite predominantly. The Mausoleum, Temple of Artemis, and Colossus of Rhodes. You can just see a tiny bit of the statue of Zeus in Olympia. He's just poking out of the temple there, but that was the tricky one on this new piece because I didn't know whether to depict him within a temple or out in the open, and kind of went for a bit of both. As you'll see once the piece, you've already seen some of the in-process images. I've sort of drawn that sort of almost like facade of columns surrounding him, and he's on his chair, sort of out in the open, but not enclosed within the temple. So that idea came about last year during the Greek Odyssey piece, in putting some of those wonders in, and I thought it'd be quite cool to draw some of them more close up, a bit like the same style as the piece before that, Ascend the Acropolis. I think just conceptualizing a few different ideas over the past 6 months, and actually it was around Christmas time. I don't know if I've actually still got them. I probably I've either recycled them or binned them now. But I made a load of cardboard cutouts of all of the wonders, and just sort of spent half a day. And I did take a load of photos of them. And the idea was to have them all roughly in perspective. And I put them on a table in different positions around, and just took loads of photos just to see. And also, I suppose, for anyone listening, if they're not familiar, obviously all of the wonders are spread out a fair bit. None of them are within close proximity of each other. So the idea of this particular piece is it's very much a made up piece. This one is not factually based in terms of an actual location. The seven wonders are real, or it's inspired by the seven real wonders, but they're all brought together within one piece, as if it was just one city where they all are together, but also inspired roughly by the landscapes. So I've got the statue of Zeus, sort of Olympia based, which could be considered Pedoples. Colossus of Rhodes, he's kind of on his own little island, which represents Rhodes. Temple of Artemis and Halicarnassus, Mausoleum at Halicarnassus are kind of on the Asia Minor section. Lighthouse of Alexandria, Giza pyramids are on the more Egypt section, and then Hanging Gardens of Babylon at the back, modern day Iraq. So it's inspired by where they could be in the world, but obviously all brought together in a very close proximity sense. And yeah, I played with quite a few different ideas of what would work, what angles with these cardboard cutouts. Like I said, I'll have to share them with you just to show you what I meant. They're very basic.
Yeah, I think I remember you sharing an image some months ago up on Facebook or somewhere where you just had, I think it was more of a, can you guess what I'm working on next type of thing, and you just had these little cardboard things set up on the table.
Yeah, and I've got one of those little sort of drawing figurines, which moves into different positions for figure drawing, I suppose. So I represented him as the Colossus of Rhodes, and then all the other ones were little figurines made out of cardboard, just to give me a bit of a depth and perspective. And some of them I ended up putting on books to raise, to imagine, if that one was maybe a bit higher on a hill, or this one was lower, or that one was further away and stuff. I've definitely exaggerated the size of some of them and positions. So the pyramids are probably slightly larger than they need to be, or they could have been. The pyramids are obviously still very much there, and you can go and visit them. Safety, COVID regulations, of course, come into play, but when all the world opens up again, you can go and visit them and see them for yourself, obviously. But ones that are no longer there, their actual size determines how big they were. Like, how big was the Colossus of Rhodes? How tall was the Mausoleum, Halicarnassus, things like that, and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Like, drawing those this past week, and they've actually been my favorite section to draw, because they were something that I hadn't drawn before or wasn't familiar with any of my works that I've been experimenting and playing with over the last few years. They were very much a mystery to me, so drawing them was really exciting, and it's definitely got me inspired to do a piece inspired by ancient city of Babylon at some point in the future.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, having seen, I guess, some of the updated, the snapshots that you've shown of the updated of the progress of the work, you've kind of taken that departure away from the geographical landscape to where all the focus is on the actual monuments themselves now. And I mean, obviously, some of them are just, we don't know what they look like. So how did you go about, I guess, getting an image into your head of how you wanted, say, the Hanging Towers of Babylon to look, or the Lighthouse of Alexandria? What did you sort of turn to other artists' representations, or
Definitely other artist representations over the years. I mean, a combination of all books I've got, and looking at images on the net, and just and even some films where they've depicted them. I think the film Alexander, the one with Colin Farrell, I know it wasn't maybe considered the best biopic film or anything, but they definitely went to Babylon in that film, and I remember the visuals of some of it being really, really cool, actually. And yeah, just sort of a combination. If anything, the Temple of Artemis, Colossus of Rhodes, and the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus within the piece, they're inspired from my own drawing in the Greek Odyssey, because I drew them very small in that piece, and at the time they were inspired by what I'd sort of found through books and online and descriptions of how they could look, and then just using my imagination to bring them together. I've essentially just drawn them again on this piece, but on a much larger and more detailed scale, because they're obviously much more in person. I mean, I've already had a few people from the Greek forum pages that you and me connected through last year. A few people have commented, sort of saying, "Oh, particularly I think on the Temple of Artemis one, saying that the bottoms of the columns, there's no evidence pointing that they were in color. You know, if anything, they were more plain." So, and I've just sort of said, "Oh, you know, well, I've kind of done my artist interpretation of it. I'm not claiming that I know that that was correct or not. It's just that's how I was feeling into the piece at the time." And you know, whereas obviously the pyramids, there's a lot more evidence of how big they were, and things pointing towards much, even they're the oldest one, but we've almost got the most information about them, ironically. So they those ones are, I figured I need to get a little bit more absolutely accurate for that reason, even though I've exaggerated maybe the size of them. But like I said, the whole piece is made up in that sort of imagination way, that I've combined it times. That's the other thing as well, because all of these would have been at different times, and not all of them would have been erected at the same time or lasted for as long. So I've kind of combined time periods and cultures within this piece. You know, I've drawn a few different Chimera ships, and even Greek battleships, and some Egyptian ones as well, just inspired from different eras, and a few different color schemes as well. So yeah, that's my way out. If people say, "Oh, you didn't draw this accurate," and I get it a lot.
You must be sitting there thinking, "Oh, you wait till you see the rest of the image if you're getting caught up on a bit of color on a column."
Oh yeah. I have it a lot, and not just with these. I mean, I won't go into it, but I get it a lot on some of my work. A lot of people, because they see the country or the city, and they'll assume it's a real map, a lot of them. And I get people, you know, I'd say try to pull me up, or pull me up literally on, "Oh, this is incorrect." And I was like, "Well, it's incorrect if I was claiming it to be a map, yes, but it's just an interpretation. Like, it's just how I've wanted to visualize. Like, you know, there's a piece over that way which is of the Middle East as one big map, which I did in 2017, and I've highlighted certain cities bigger than others, and I've had a lot of people say that's not that big. And I know it's not, but it's kind of just, I've imagined it to be like that. I've drawn it as if, just imagine if that's somewhere, you know, inspired by that place. And yeah, the same goes for this one. I know I'll definitely get some people, and also on the Ascend the Acropolis piece, I've had a few people pull me up on, "Oh yeah, those colours wouldn't have been considered correct, or you wouldn't have seen that there. The port is way too close." And I said, "I know, but I wanted to show a bit of sea." And that's the thing, like, I suppose with being an artist, like, I can play with the rules a little bit, but when I'm drawing something that I'm taking from an actual source of history or accuracy, it's hard to sometimes convince people that it's still just inspired by, and I've used my imagination to sort of bring it together. So yeah, I'm expecting on the new 7 piece that I will have a few people that will possibly pull me up here and there on a couple of things, but it's okay. I've enjoyed doing it either way.
Yeah. I mean, you're an artist. It's your interpretation. You're not a cartographer or
exactly. I mean,
or an
I'll show you
architect.
for the viewers, if anyone is watching this on the special. So that's it, nearly complete.
It's looking amazing.
Nice. Yeah. So as we mentioned, we've got the Statue of Zeus, Colossus of Rhodes, Lighthouse of Alexandria, Temple of Artemis, Mausoleum, Halicarnassus, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and the Pyramids of Giza.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Then I've incorporated a couple of things, all inspired by each of the locations. So also Babylon, like the famous the Gate, some of the temples surrounding Egypt. So each one has got its own sort of regional feel and a bit more sort of inspired by that area. Like that's generally got an Egyptian feel. This whole area is a bit more Greek inspired. That's the Babylonian, but generally you get a feel for the whole thing. So yeah, well, all I've got to do pretty much is the signature scroll, which I penciled in before, a bit more on the border, a couple of touch-ups, and hopefully the piece will be complete next week, or early next week. I'll have it ready for launch. So
yeah, that's what I guess my next question was going to be, when can we expect the release of?
So I mean, I think over the weekend I'm possibly going to be having this one finished, and then early next week, because once I finish a piece, I'll scan it digitally, which allows me to then show the image online, and that same scan is what I use to make my prints with. So the print orders will be available to purchase, hopefully, once the scan is complete, and I'm thinking early next week, so possibly even Monday, and then I'll make the orders available. People can start ordering from that point. I'll probably do a newsletter and do a social media post on it as well. And then depending on how many orders come through straight away or in the first few days, will depend on as and when I can get prints out. So like the Greek Odyssey last year was, I think maybe because it had taken me so long, that was 1,000 hours of work over 5 months, that piece, give or take. And it was my most engaged piece I had with sort of my fan base. And when I finished the piece, it was my most popular online order upon completion. And I was almost a little bit inundated with the orders, which was incredible. I was hugely overwhelming. I was so grateful for it, yourself included, and some orders I was like, oh, it's taken me weeks to post out a lot of them because I'd had quite a few. So, but I suppose I can never tell how a new piece is going to perform, what people are going to think of it. Is this what they're expecting? Do people want to put it on their wall? I can't blame them if they don't. It's just a piece of art at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I've got to find a nice spot for that one when once that arrives.
I appreciate it. Yeah. They are available. I will make it available in the same size of the original, the A1, and then a smaller A2. So I always do try to, because I understand that's one thing with art. It's also wall space. Like, has anyone? Like, they might like the big pieces, but have they? You went for the big A0 Greek Odyssey piece, and even though that's the original size, I think the smaller A1 has probably been a more popular size because not everyone can accommodate the bigger space. They'll see the big prints and go, "Oh, I really like that, but I've got nowhere to put it." Yes. So that's sometimes why the smaller sizes can be more popular. But I always do encourage, like, if you like it and you've got the wall space, go for the big one because it shows the best detail, closest to the original. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think I was planning on trying to, I guess, put this interview out around the same time that you release 7, so it can sort of coincide. Yeah. So we'll try and work that out. But anyway, I think we might try and maybe wrap things up now. But before we do, perhaps could you give us an idea of what's after 7? What are some projects that are in the near future?
Yeah, so I think definitely I want to continue working on the ancient history subjects. Speaking to you recently as well about a possible ancient Egyptian piece, Egyptian world, Egyptian mythology piece will take place. I do need to do a lot more research though on that to get it accurate. I mean, depending on how travel restrictions go, I'd maybe even like to tie in a trip to Egypt at some point this year. And if that's the case, then I'd rather wait to do the Egyptian piece until I've at least visited and got a bit more of a feel for it. A lot of people have been on my back about doing a Norse mythology piece, which will be very much more imagination based. Think Greek mythology, but on drugs. It's obviously they've got quite a vivid imagination, the Norse.
Multiple dimensions to it. Multiple dimensions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the multiple dimensions. I mean, I've done a fair bit of research on it, and there's obviously I like the idea of the world tree with the 9 realms and Midworld and Asgard and things. But I'll be honest, I'm reading a lot on Norse mythology at the moment, so I'm keeping within that theme. But very much, I think the future of my work is, for now anyway, going to still be ancient related. So whether that be ancient worlds, mythology based, history based work. Occasionally, I will do the odd modern day piece. So obviously, I did the Italy piece early this year and things. I am, once I finish this piece, I do have a small commission that I'm just going to be doing in between projects. And also as well, you may have seen the other month before I started this piece, I did the color rendition of a previous work of a map that I did in 2019 called The City of the British Isles, which was a black and white piece, but then I did a color digital rendition of it, which I made available for print, and that proved quite popular. And because I've got quite a few pieces in that particular city of series, as I call them, that are all in black and white, I figured in time I'll do them all as a color piece. So you actually might be interested. The next one I'm going to do is the Australia piece, which I did in 2018. A few people have been inquiring, oh, are you going to do the Australia piece in color? Because obviously that would lend itself quite nicely to as a full color rendition. They don't take me as long because I've already drawn the original piece. I just need to do a color version of it. So maybe a couple of weeks on that while I'm doing this commission, and then I'll start into a new project. So yeah, quite a few exciting things. And I will give a little tease as well as to a very big project that I do want to do at some point. It's going to be very different to my other works in terms of the shape, possibly a different shape canvas to what I do, but inspired very much by all of history combined as one piece. I've kind of already decided that I'd like to call it the Anthropocene, sort of inspired by what mankind has done since we've been here on this earth, both culturally, architecturally, growth, just where we started and where we've got to and where we're going.
Yeah,
if I can do that, yeah, they're kind of like a bit like it was inspired by that book a few years ago, Sapiens.
I've read that one.
Yeah, it kind of, I like the idea that history in a nutshell, history all together at once. And so a little bit like the Greek Odyssey piece, an idea that's it was brewing for many years and then it happened. That's another one that's been brewing for many years as well. But I figured because it's going to be quite a big piece, it's probably going to be anywhere from 6 months to a year project. So, but whether I do that one next month, next year, or the next 10 years, I'm not sure. So it will happen though.
Yeah, no, it's I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what you come out with next.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much as always. And as well, thank you as well for, of course, helping me as well throughout, particularly the Greek Odyssey piece, the making of it, because it helped me with a lot of the names and the locations of different sort of states and cities and towns and things. They were that was a real big help. So I really appreciate that one. So.
No problem at all. Glad to help out. Yeah, it's good to watch it all come together. But thank you for coming on and talking with me, Jeff. It was good to have you here and listening to all your sharing your inspiration and ideas. And I'm definitely going to be continuing to follow your work. And I encourage everyone to jump onto Jeff's website at www.jeffmurray.co.uk and check out all his work there, all the Greek stuff and all his other world-inspired projects. They're amazing. The amount of detail that you see in them is just mind-blowing. But I guess we'll wait for, I guess, within the next week to see the release of 7, and we look forward to seeing that revealed. But I guess before we go, Jeff, where can people follow your work and where can they get in touch with you?
Yep. So you already mentioned the website, www.jeffmurray.co.uk. And through there, the website, you can link to the social media pages as well. And there is a contact page through there, but the social media pages, I'm on Instagram at Jeff_Murray_art. And if you do just search Jeff Murray Art, it will come up. And also the same on Facebook, Jeff Murray Art. And you can follow if you like through there. And if anything, the social media pages are handy because I share a lot of the in-process images of the pieces, so you can see a lot of them being made, and then I'll do little teases towards them. I do also have a YouTube channel, which is linked through the website, Jeff Murray Art. However, it's rarely updated. It probably needs a bit of dusting off and TLC. So mostly through the website, and of course on the social media pages. And as well, if you do like through the website, there is you can sign up and subscribe to my newsletter, where you'll find out about the latest pieces. Also, if I'm ever doing online promotions, art exhibitions, shows, that's the best way to sort of find out about the latest works. I usually send out anywhere from 2, sometimes 3 newsletters a month.
That's good to hear. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Jeff, and yeah, thank you for your time.
Much appreciated, Mark, and likewise, thank you very much, and yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
No worries, thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jeff. I had a great time exploring the motivations and the mind behind the amazing works that Jeff has obviously put so much passion into. As discussed, his latest work, 7, has just now been released. Jeff also has an offer running with this release. Keeping in line with the theme, he will be offering 10% off 7, valid for the next 7 days of its release. So if you would like to pick up yourself a copy of Jeff's latest creation, head to www.jeffmurray.co.uk, and in the cart, if you enter the code 710, that's SEVEN and the number 10, a 10% discount will be applied to your order if you place it before Tuesday the 8th of June, 2021. Thanks again everyone for tuning into the series, and I hope you enjoyed this format, and I plan on continuing to bring you more interview episodes along the way through our journey of the narrative of the history of ancient Greece. If you would like to support the series, you can head to www.castingthroughancientgreece.com and click on the Support the Series button, where you can discover many ways that you can extend your support in helping grow the series. Until next time, take care.